Boot, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, man.
Hello. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to slink in the shadows and not show my face. Because
No, dude,
I was gonna say a joke about like my face being all weird, but it's not. I just don't want to go on camera. It's more more chill.
I've seen you on stage before. You're doing yourself a disservice. You're a good looking young man, Boot.
Well, we'll leave it at that compliment. Yes.
I'll just proceed to describe your face in perfect detail and
Yeah.
link it to your IRL name. Yeah.
Blue eyes and bright red hair and the 6'2".
Yeah. I thought it was 6'6". Ah, shit. Never mind. I'm giving away too much. But yeah, dude, I was always curious, and I don't think I've ever asked you this, but where did the name Boot come from? Why Boot?
It's a gaming tag that I had for ages because like I used to play competitive games and there's been like several iterations of Boot. And then I just dropped it all. Like that scene in like The Social Network where Justin Timberlake's like just dropped the it's just Facebook. So
Yeah.
like there was all this stuff in front of Boot, and then I'm just like, let's just go with just Boot. And so been rolling that in crypto, just ported that over from gaming. And I think this is before everybody kind of had like a handle, like they were just like using their name and stuff. And like I was just like, yeah, just call me Boot. It's so much easier because like everything I was doing in Discord at the time was just under that like title. Like I was just my Discord was called Boot and stuff. It wasn't lowercase Boot at that time. I rebranded all my socials to kind of like match and when everybody was really bored in 2023. So yeah, Boot, lowercase Boot, whatever, that's my name. From gaming is the TLDR.
Sick. Okay. What games were you into?
So like I played a lot. Like I was a professional Counter-Strike player at one point, but back in the day
it's incredibly based. Hell yeah.
We're talking Counter-Strike 1.6. So we're talking many moons ago. But
Whoa.
And so that wasn't Boot then. I was under a different name. But man, heaps of games. Like I used to play like this like military sim game kind of professionally as like Squad, like some shooter game and stuff, and heaps of like RTS stuff. And yeah, I'm not like good at every game. I just was like always really good at FPS. But like the older you get, like the worse. Like it's really hard to maintain like being good at an FPS game. Like if you're not naturally gifted. Like I was like better than the average person, but had to play a lot to maintain it. So like I'd have to play so many hours per day just to stay at like my, the lowest tier of the professional rank. I'm talking like the very bottom in terms of skills.
Okay. But like enough to be like claim professional.
Well, I mean, you shit on any normal person and any person who's slightly good at the game, but like in comparison to the people who are really good, like you're not good. They always will beat you. Like it's mathematical impossibility that you can beat them unless it's due to luck because they're just quicker.
That's wild. Yeah. And isn't that to do with like reflex times when you're younger? Like you essentially have like an athletic peak the same way that like, there's no 50-year-old Olympic sprinters. Like you just have quicker snap reaction times when you're 21 compared to when you age. Is that true for esports?
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, it is, and it's not even like the time is the it's not like I don't think a normal person would be able to perceive the difference, but it's just the fraction of a second that person gets, and you always like you can never win an exchange. And again, it depends on the games because a lot of these FPS games is kind of like there's some strategy to it, and some of it's luck based, but like anything that is pure like competency based, like in that 1v1 situation, like you will always lose. So that's just and the nature of the beasts, and also like. Being in Australia, like it's very hard to maintain relevancy in terms of competitive gaming because our internet was traditionally so shit and is still shit. So yeah,
yep.
Makes it harder.
And playing on servers with like 2,000 ping, and you're like, well, why try? So professional gaming. How'd you get into crypto, and what kind of made you stick around?
I mean, like my first interaction with crypto was Silk Road, and so I mean, I'm not saying what for. I'm just saying it was. And
let the imagination run wild there, folks. That's good.
Loaded up a couple of Bitcoins, and man, I didn't even know when this was. This is like early. This has got to be 2010 or something. Is that? I'm not predating anything. 2011, around this time.
So just assume first couple years.
Yeah, but like we weren't buying crypto because it was crypto. We were buying it because it could be used on Silk Road. Like the like I didn't even look into it. I had no clue. I was just like, yeah, it's Bitcoin, it's cryptocurrency. Like I didn't even know what the definition of cryptocurrency was, just that you could exchange it for goods or services on the internet. So like, you know, and we didn't know how to even buy it, like, and then this wallet stuff, and we just couldn't really work it out. So like, I mean, out there's probably a wallet that me and one of my old friends who I haven't seen in ages probably had like maybe like 10 Bitcoin on. But maybe he kept it and just didn't tell anyone. So.
Well, that's interesting because a friend of mine that definitely sold certain goods and provided certain services in high school recently uncovered the seed phrase to a Bitcoin wallet that he used for similar purposes. And he had like literally just over 3.5 Bitcoin on there.
Crazy.
And he's working like a pretty regular job and was just like, oh, holy fuck. Like I've just fallen into 300 and something thousand Australian dollars. Nice. Yeah. And I was kind of like, have fun explaining that one to the the taxation authorities. But anyway,
good problem to have.
It's a fantastic problem.
I'm being hyperbolic. I don't really know that it has 7 Bitcoin, but like it definitely had a couple at that time. We definitely bought like 10 Bitcoin, but we probably spent it all.
Yeah, okay. There's something there. All right, so Silk Road, Bitcoin, what makes you actually think like, oh, okay, cool, digital money, I can speculate on this?
I always was looking into contrarian stuff in terms of like society and things like that. And like I was always aware of crypto, just mainly for like, again, from the Silk Road kind of origins, and then into like, I think like at some point when I was writing a thesis, there was a chapter on blockchain and its use in like the aid network for NGOs, like distributed ledger tech, but like mainly to track aid so that, you know, it couldn't be like siphoned off due to corruption.
So those kind of like almost like blockchain proof systems where it's like, okay, money's going here and it gets to this person and there's no, it's like that charity misspending almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like from a point of like, obviously not as currency, but just as identification and stuff. So like, but from an investment point, exposure like 16, 17 is probably where I like bought. I didn't even know what I bought. I can't even tell you. But like Bitcoin and like maybe like Litecoin. Maybe I bought Ethereum. I don't even remember. I can't even make that claim. But like a very small, by virtue of not having a huge disposable income at the time, you know, pivot into crypto, and then just like left it there and didn't do anything with it. But then a serious revisit of the scene in the end of 2020, which is probably not like, I mean, I could have timed it better and done it at the start of 2020 and it would have been way better. But like the end of 2020, getting into like actually looking at crypto, I think I saw some stuff by Justin Khan, the guy who founded Twitch. He was talking about like NFTs and how he was like selling a YouTube video as an NFT. And then I saw a video by the artists in Melbourne, Rhett Mankind, and he was talking about digital art and stuff, and he had a pretty popular video on YouTube at the time. And so like I looked into like NFTs and crypto from that, but I mainly got onboarded to crypto through NFTs. So then I wound up on Nifty Gateway in 21 and was like buying art there and stuff, and then got into the whole like that onboarded you to crypto because you had to, you know, have crypto to purchase. I mean, you could use a credit card, but like eventually like pivoted off that kind of self-custody platform into like the OpenSea world and buying and trading NFTs and stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, cool. You know, I'm getting into Ethereum. Like I'm starting to learn, you know, how this shit works. Like, how do you clear a stuck transaction? Like, how do you gas up a transaction? Like, how can I set up a Gnosis safe? And like, I just started like really participating in the techie nerdy side of stuff just because I found that interesting. Like, and also you could get an edge from trading it. And then it was kind of an Ethereum maxi, I would say, up until the end of that kind of NFT cycle. Actually still, I didn't really pivot out of Ethereum until like, I want to say like mid 2023, maybe. Started buying some other stuff and looking at like, that's about like, I did not get in as early or as intensely as you did, but in terms of flipping my Ethereum bias would have been midway towards the end of last year. I was like, hang on. Yeah.
What's going on here? There's other shit happening.
Yeah. I feel like that was the tipping point for a lot of people. And like I know a lot about Ethereum. It's like the network I know the most about and like how to use it. And like, I'm very comfortable with, you know, EVM, but I kind of started getting into like the Cosmos ecosystem at the end of last year, and like getting fully into Cosmos. And like I think Cosmos has cool tech, but it's a super boring nerd chain series of chains, like nerd network. And then like eventually, because I was like, nah, fuck Solana. I'm not going to look at Solana because like, you know, I can't, like, if I go into Solana, I'm just going to be some other pleb in Solana. But if I go into Cosmos, like I can be like the Cosmos guy. And I was like, you know, I could do stuff there. I can like build projects and like whatever. Like I just had this goal, and then like Cosmos turned out to be shit. And so I just came back to Solana, and now I'm just like, I only really do anything on Solana. But like I'll go, I'm basically chain agnostic. I will use whatever is the most profitable.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, I had a similar moment. I wouldn't say that I was like getting into Cosmos as like I had a goal of being like, oh fuck yeah, Cosmos. But like when Celestia came out in November, I was like, oh holy shit, okay, let's see what happens here. And then slowly but surely, I was like, okay, maybe Cosmos isn't all it's gonna turn out to be. So yeah. You've done, from what I can understand, pretty well over the last like 9 to 12 months. Tell me about some of your winning strategies from this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start off as a trader. I haven't ever traditionally been a trader, like, because I come from like the university and state government sector. So like making money was always like not something that you did. Like, you know what I mean, right? And
yeah,
and also you never had any money, so you didn't learn about investing. But then I was like, nah, fuck this. Like, I'm gonna become full capitalist. So I just kind of like left all that, and I really cut my teeth like in the stock market, like in 2019 and 2020. And so that like I spent like all of 2019 just like learning everything about like investing. And then in 2020, like when COVID crash happened, like I was really well positioned to like take advantage of it, just based on having done all that previous work. So like leveraging that, and then like bringing some of that skill set to crypto, which was just, it's hard to say like a specific strategy that I use, but like mainly the main thesis point that I have for everything is just like the price of the asset is worth what it is when you're looking at it, and that's it. Like that's the only universal truth, right? If I open like my Phantom wallet and there's something in there that's worth 10 grand, I mean, like obviously with slippage and price impact, you're not getting 10 grand out, right? And trying to exchange it, sell it on exchange, etc. Like you're going to get clipped out multiple % on that way down. But like the only fundamental truth is like that 10 grand is worth 10 grand. Whereas like, I think a lot of other people in the industry, like I'll hear them and they'll be like, yeah, I have like, you know, 1% of this token, but I'm going to hold it for another 2 to 3x and then I'll sell. And I'll just be like, well, if you're so certain that it's going to go 2 to 3x from here, like why don't you put all of your net worth into it? And they would just be like, well, you know, I'm not. And then I'm like, well, then what do you mean you're going to sell when it goes another 2 to 3x? Like there's just so much retard strategy. So like I treat it like, I don't want to go too deep into this at the start of this, but I treat it kind of like stocks in terms of like, if you're buying like something on the ASX and it has a 60% pump, right? It's usually based on something or whatever, like some fundamentals and some crap like that. But like that 60% pump is like that's the new price, and like that is good profit. So like, you know, taking that and then figuring out what to do with that later is probably like what you should do, rather than just like blindly holding something hoping that it's going to continue to pump, unless you really have some like long-term thesis of this, right? And then when I got into crypto, really realizing like at the start that, not realizing at the start, getting sold like all these visions of like, you know, ETH to 10K, like, you know, like mass adoption, and like, you know, blockchain is going to revolutionize everything, and like getting swept up in that, like that's why people kind of were holding these tokens, holding their profit past the point that they should have, and then learning that all of that is bullshit, and really the only fundamental truth again is the numbers on the screen at that time which you're looking at it, and learning to take profit based on that. So like, I know that's kind of like a long-winded saying of basically like my strategy is to take profit when the coin goes up, but you'd be surprised at how effective that is. Like, oh
shit, yeah, trust me, as like like there have been just even personal experience in this cycle from just like degenerate gambling on Solana memes. Like I would say 95% of the time I had a strategy of like aggressively taking profit on doubles, triples, quadruples, that kind of thing. And just that worked extremely well for almost all coins. But occasionally I left like a lot on the table the one in particular I think back to is Bowden. Like I found Bowden extremely early and I was like, oh, cool, haha, funny coin, I buy. And that's the thesis for memes that I was like, if I laugh, I buy. So this is really, really S tier intellectual shit. But,
Yeah.
and then I kind of pulled the same process that I would for any of the other shitters that I was picking up on pump.fun. And then as it just kept going up, I was like, oh shit. And then I would look back on it in like another 24 hours and I was like, oh no, I've sold like 60% of this stack already. And then sure enough, like I sold basically almost all of it before it ever went to $1. And then obviously we retraced all the way down to back to 10 million. But it was that thing of like, okay, aggressive profit taking works most of the time. And then there are other
Yeah.
times where you're leaving it on the table. I think that's a big thing of like process oriented, like what you've just described is having like a process oriented approach compared to like an outcome oriented approach where it's like, okay, this happens, X, Y, and Z occurs, I take X amount of profit. And instead of just being like, whoa, it's going to be $1 million in 3 months. So why would I sell? And it's just that serial round tripper mentality. Because I've done that a bunch where you just are like, oh, cool. And then you check in a week and you're like, oh, I've left thousands of dollars. They're gone. And that's not coming back.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you have any like hard and fast rules for shit coining? Like, are there any really strict processes that you have for profit taking or sizing, exiting positions, adjusting risk, etc.?
I think like, look, it's the strategy of just like selling on the way up, like generally is where I would suggest that people do. Like, so like, it's hard. There's no hard and fast rule, but like, let's just say if I had 1% of a coin and it suddenly pumped, right? Again, there's a whole lot of factors going into like me holding this long term, like depending on like if the team looks like they're cooking, like, you know, if the socials are good, if I'm hearing, you know, the right things in certain group chats, etc. Like if they're getting those exchange listings and like kind of going through the motions, like that's going to make me much more comfortable in holding. And like there'll be certain circumstances where like I probably wouldn't sell a lot, but as a hard and fast rule, I'll generally clip out like 25% of any position on any significant pump, and then look to reassess that in the coming, you know, over the coming X period of time, and probably clip out another 25%, or like, you know, in totality 50%, right? Not 25% of the remainder. So like, once I've clipped out like 50%, I'm kind of good. Like I'm kind of like, well, you know, I have made this amount of profit. I'm going to sit back and chill. But it depends again, because if the amount of money is something that I'm unable to sleep on at nighttime and I keep waking up and looking at, then I will just sell and just like move on, because I'm like that bar raises each successful kind of run up you have. Like you get more comfortable holding larger and larger bags. But I think that's not often talked about, like the psychology of being able to hold some big bag that may or may not even be in like a hardware wallet. It could be on like a you know, some fucking hot wallet. So like, I mean, the advice I would give to people is like, if you're comfortable holding it and you're not worried about, like if it went to zero, would you beat yourself up? Like, and if the answer to that is no, well then maybe you shouldn't sell. But if you have life-changing money on the table and you want it to become even more life-changing money, I would just like say there's always other trades, right? Like I've never been in a position where like I had a huge bag once and then never had another one again, because like if you stay in the industry long enough and you're in a bull run, like you will catch multiple wins. Like it's just as long as you survive and as long as you have liquidity. So I think just do what you feel comfortable doing. Some people have very regimented rules. I, again, do it a lot by feel. There's just too many variables to really say, but...
Well, that's the thing with meme coins. Like you are literally trading in the absence of fundamentals, and so much of it comes down to... It's like, unfortunately, for like someone from the outside who's like buying meme coins, it's like so much of it comes back to, you know, basing your opinions on what other people are saying in group chats. And, you know, if the team is someone that you know of and the socials are good, and you think that the ticker is good, like it would melt the brain of like a TradFi analyst if you heard, if I had to sit down and explain a couple of positions of like, okay, why do you like this one? It's like, well, forgive me for saying this, but the ticker does look pretty good. It's like,
yeah,
how do you quantify that as a strategy? You don't. So much of it is just vibes and being on crypto Twitter all the fucking time.
Well, there's
and
cues.
Being like,
so you mentioned Twitter, and I think that's probably the advice that I would give is like, if I'm holding a bag of something and every single person on Twitter is talking about it, like I'm going to sell, because the consensus is too strong on that like I have these certain accounts that I use as like a bellwether of like whether or not I should sell. And like if all of these LARP accounts start talking about the coin that I'm in, which has happened before, like I'm aggressively exiting my position at that point, because it's reached critical mass on the timeline. And when that happens, it's you know, that's the peak of the attention economy. So being able to understand the ebb and flow of the attention economy can actually basically be a good trading strategy. And, you know, if no one's talking about it, it's either a great investment or a shit investment, right? So like with Unicorn, I was pretty early to Unicorn because it was in the Cosmos ecosystem and was hanging out and talking to the team and all this kind of stuff. And it was something that like I was like telling everybody about, and like no one was fucking listening until they bridged to Solana and had that, like got some KOLs to start promoting it, and then everybody suddenly was a Unicorn expert. But like that's one instance where like I was like OTC buying Unicorn on Cosmos for like 6 months before anybody mentioned it in the timeline. And it's like, but you could equally do that and be like, so
That is one of my most like painful fades from you anyway. I remember like seeing that and being like, oh, it looks cool, I'll check it out. And then just classic typical ADHD brain, you know, got distracted with a trillion other potential shitcoin projects and was like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I never got around to it. And then eventually when they released and bridged to Solana, I was like, oh, I do remember. I remember seeing this. I remember being told like, hey, definitely check this out. And I didn't. And it's like, oh Christ. Like those kind of projects, I think it's distinguishing between when no one's speaking about it and you have that feeling that you're onto something, and then having reasons for why you are beyond just like, oh, well, if this completely wild thing happens, then it could take off. And I think that's something like a trap that people get themselves into, particularly with memes and meme adjacent projects of like, oh, well, if this trend catches on or if this thing happens. And it's like, then you have to run probabilities on how likely that is. But when it's something like a project like Unicorn, you know, that's a much clearer signal of like, okay, there's a really good team here. There's a product. There's a lot of actual virality that it can capitalize on. So yeah.
Yeah. And like, I think it really just depends on like kind of your strategy, because look, you can like, let's say you have 10 grand and like there's 10 interesting things and you put $1,000 into each of them. You know, if you're not like an idiot, like a few of them will pay off and like maybe 70% fail, but like the 3 that work, you know, end up paying for everything, or even like 2xing your money or whatever, right? So you can play it that way and kind of like spread a bit of risk. Or you can, again, like if you have a strong conviction in something, like pick 1 or 2 things and kind of go pretty heavy and then like just hope that that conviction plays out. I honestly think like the former method of like spreading your plays out is like safer, because yeah, you won't get a huge payday if you're right, but it's just such a low risk kind of area to play in, because especially if you're in the industry, because like if you're in the industry, like you just know what will work and you get information from people, like, and so you know who's on the team, like what they've done before, and it's like it's very hard to be consistently picking stuff incorrectly if you've been here for a couple of years. I'm not saying it makes you smarter, it just gives you access to better information and more of a gut feel on what could be correct. But I mean, to be clear, like I am quite conservative as an investor in the space, in that I don't take huge bet sizes. But like, again, I'm of the conviction, like I'm not even of the conviction, it's a reality that you could come along with like 5k AUD and put it on the right coin and walk away with $1 million. Like it happens. Like you don't need to be throwing $100,000 at the start. Like that's just that, to me, that's peak retard to be going in heavy on this stuff.
I'm completely of that mind. Like I just very much accepted early on, after essentially just throwing money down the drain on shitters for months at a time in like mid 2023 on ETH, like when those kind of meme coins were first showing up in like July, August timeframe. I was getting the occasional win, and I just realized like, okay, I'm just going to accept that I'm not him, and I'm just going to start playing a lot more conservatively and taking smaller wins where I can, pocketing those, and then like recycling the money into high conviction stuff, and not just full porting something and being like, well, it's all gone. I'm not that kind of investor and never have been. I think having that spread and just understanding that, yeah, there will eventually be something that moves if you're in it long enough and if you stick around and you don't lose all your goddamn money.
Well, the other model is speed running to either mass success or bankruptcy, basically. And like I know people who bid pretty big and have made some massive wins, but they have also lost a lot of money. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of focus on like how much, like what sizing do you go in on what token, and like which tokens do you look at to go in on, etc., like that. But at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter. Like if you're in profit on something, the most important thing that you should be doing is understanding how to take profit, right? And I don't just mean just converting that coin into, you know, like as we talked the other night, gas tokens like Solana or just ETH itself. I'm talking about like getting that, turning into stable coins, or like off-ramping that through an exchange into fiat. and like, okay, like actually tangibly securing a bag from something, because once you've done that process and walked that step, every other trade that you do it in the same model. And I like, again, if we're going cross chain and using L2s and all this weird kind of scale ups and stuff, like you should know how to do that in every ecosystem that you're in, because again, the ability to kind of off ramp funds and turn it into actual real world dollars, like, is the skill set that most people don't have, and that's why they end up round tripping everything. So like, yeah, I'm always skeptical when people are saying like, I'm up 8 figures on this thing. It's like, I mean, I know that they are on paper, but like until they've sold it, like they're going to round trip 8 figures basically. So yeah, be selling basically.
Yep, I think that's so important, and that's something I saw on, I've forgotten who it was, but it was on Taiki's Market Wizards, and he called essentially crypto should be is I've forgotten the exact wording he used, but he was like, crypto is a butthole. It's an exit only market. Like once you secure your wins, you get that in a bank account and you keep it there. And once that money becomes fiat, it never goes back in. Like once it comes out, that's it. It's done. Congratulations. Don't ever think like, okay, cool. I'll just sink, 20K back in as liquidity because we're going again. He's like, no. Like just play the same risk profile and always be fiating essentially.
Yeah, a good approach, to be honest. Like most people get too, I mean, we talked about this the other night, but like a lot of people get too caught up in this idea of like, crypto is a hedge against inflation, so I better put all of my net worth into crypto. And it's like, that's a really good move when the market is moving up. But when the market nukes like 50% overnight and suddenly you have lost most of your money, and then you continue to hold it down due to sunk cost fallacy to like 90% loss, like it takes a strong person to be able to hold through that back to the highs. And then again, usually you're probably going to dip out at the entry price in which you got in. So it's like, it's like, again, inflation is what, like 8%. I'd rather lose 8% of my fiat yearly or whatever than put, with 100% risk on into some fucking shit coin. It's just so stupid. Yeah.
It is funny that's almost like the justification. Well, it's like, well, I'd be losing like 6.5% if I just held it in fiat. It's like, yeah, it's better than losing 90%, bro. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And that's annually. It's like better than losing 90% in 24 hours. So we'll see how that goes. Dude, do you have any high conviction plays that you're looking at right now? And like, again, you don't have to shill your bags exactly, but are there any sectors or networks or things that you're looking at that you think, okay, you can be as specific with this as you like. You can name projects if you wish. I'm happy to also shill my little things as well. This is a safe space. But yeah, high conviction stuff.
I don't really have high conviction in the market. Like, I'm not a bear, but I'm like contrarian. And I mean, maybe I am. I'm pretty bearish. I just like, I don't like to fucking sit back and laugh about wag me up only. Like, I just want to look at things critically, and that tends to put me into kind of like the bear territory. But look, right now, I'm pretty. I'm my strategy for the last 9 months has been to take money out of the market, right? And there's certain plays that I've gone in consistently over time, like in that vein, but like mostly like the strategy is to be exiting. But the stuff that I'm still in, like mainly Unicorn, because I think like that hit like 30 million FTV. I mean, it has a real, like the FTV on Sol is not the actual FTV, but whatever. Like the Sol FTV was 30 million, and I think it's back to like 8 million, but like you could OTC for like 50% the current rate. And so like I've been doing that. And I traded, like I got in like super early on a few coins that kind of ran up like recently. I'm not going to say what they were, but like I kind of got lucky there. But I'm playing with like not a huge stack in the market right now because I just don't see the risk to reward as being there. Like I'm going to kind of like wait and see how things go. But like I think like having a kind of like smaller portfolio to play on super high risk plays and being comfortable enough with all of that going to zero is like my current thesis, right? And so if that, like, and again, that portfolio is going to be relative to like whatever people's risk tolerance is, and I'm conservative, so like it's not a huge portfolio by my standards. But again, that's the model that I'm playing. So when when I'm telling people like that I'm in unicorn, etc., it's with the fundamental understanding that I am comfortable with that being $0. It's not, I'm never checking the charts, if that makes any sense. Like I'm going to go away in like 2 weeks, and like it's not something that I'll ever check in on, except just to make sure that like they're going to bridge and when the token gets released. Like I'm not, it's not a trade that I'm worried about.
I think that plays into something that there are moments where I like to try and be the first to something, but then a lot of the time, especially with trends, I kind of enjoy waiting for confirmation before I then start jamming funds in. I'm like, is this actually worth it for me? And like when Soul Memes started kicking off, the first couple of like serious runners, like when WIF started moving and then on-chain started heating up, it wasn't until like essentially a couple of weeks had passed until a lot of coins had hit like, 50 to 100 mil that I was like, oh, okay, like this is actually moving and I feel comfortable kind of just jamming capital into stuff. And that worked for like a couple of months following, but it was not, I don't personally, for me anyway, find much value in being like, oh, I'm going to be the one to like try and catch the trend here. Because it's like, if I'd done that, if you tried to do that across all of the other chains and all of the respective seasons, you would have had a bad fucking time.
Yeah, I think like the model of getting involved with this stuff has to be one of like understanding that most of this stuff is a scam, in my opinion, right? And so it's all about like understanding time horizons, and in the start of a bull market, like those time horizons are like quite elongated in that you could enter MOG at like sub 20 million and sell at 800 million, right? Like it has room to move. But in the current like when things start getting harder and harder and those free wins like start to dry up, it becomes much more PvP. So you have to understand that like you're not trading against like average Joe from the start of the cycle who came back with a liquidity stack. Like that guy has gone. You're trading against like the top traders at this stage. So it's and again the devs of the contracts themselves. So it becomes much more PvP. So like anyone who's like, yeah man, this thing's going to get listed and the market makers are coming in, it's going to get on Binance, like it's going to go to $1 billion. Like that's pure retard logic, right? At this stage of the cycle. Because like, yes, that can happen in very certain circumstances. But if you're saying that for every token, like you don't have a strategy, you have hope. Like you have just pure fucking hope, copium, whatever, that your bags are going to go up. And, ruthlessly trading profit at this stage in the cycle seems to be like the only thing that makes sense. What were the stats that came out? Like the top, if you've made $1,000 off pump.fun, you're in the top 1%, which says a lot about how bad people are at trading, right? But then you have to think about how good the best traders are. And like, you can't, like, if you can't out trade them, you better take profit before they do.
Yeah. It's like, think about what the top 0.0001% looks like. And it's like, okay, you're not there.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
But it's a wild stat, man. Think about, because like the timeline would lead you to believe that everybody was fucking rich. Like they're all flying business class everywhere. They're going to these international events and stuff. But the stats don't lie. Like 99% of people have made less than $1,000 off pump.fun. And it's like, I had this realization. Like I had always been like looking into the nerdy side of the tech and like trying to understand everything. And then like when I got into trading, I looked into like all the bots, etc., like how to set everything up properly, have proper infra and all that. And I just assumed that everybody in the industry did the same thing, because when it was with Ethereum, like it just seemed the case, and like everybody was kind of like laughing on the timeline about being really into crypto. But when it went cross-chain and went capital C, like into the trenches stuff, I realized that 90% of people have no fucking idea what they're doing. Like they just were really good at writing stuff on the timeline, but then they would send me a DM going, "Hey, how do I export my private key?" Like what slippage percentage do you use on this? And I'm like, bro, you have a 7-figure portfolio. Like, why are you asking me this question? Or like someone who had like millions of dollars in Photon, but didn't have their private key exported, and Photon destroys the private key, and like so. Like, no. Yeah, but you can sell and then transfer like some tokens out, but like they didn't know how to, they actually were like on they're gonna neck themselves, but I managed to get their tokens out for them. But like, I mean, I could have grifted all these people and just made them send me the money to my wallet, but like it really highlighted to me like there's a lot of people that had a lot like stupid dumb money from the start of the bull market who still didn't understand the tech, But at this stage in the cycle, like most people who are trading actively, like are pretty good with the with the tools, and like they understand how blockchain works, and like how to read like soul scan, etc.
True, and I feel like that's something that's happened a lot. Like people have gotten way more sophisticated on chain. There's none of this just like, oh, oopsie, damn it, 7% slippage on that one. Fuck, I didn't realize that's how the little plugin in Bird Eye works. Oh well, and it's like you're not just getting those huge wins because every Joe is just like, oh, cool, token go up, lol.
Yeah,
we buy, and it's just markets become more efficient. They become less soft, less money for us. Dude, you came on Brotato Capital Spaces what, 3 nights ago, and dude, this really piqued my interest. But you essentially shat all over the idea of buying Ethereum, Solana, and like the gas tokens of the major chains. What's your broader thesis on essentially avoiding majors?
well, it's just to the point of like portfolio allocation, because like let's say somebody's total net worth is like, well, not net worth, let's say their total liquid capital is 100 grand, right? There's a lot of people in crypto that I know like that will have like 25% in meme coins, maybe 50%. But then the other 50% is just default in like Solana or Ethereum or Bitcoin. And I'm like, the question is just like, why? Because if the 25% or 50% of your portfolio allocation, like that is performing, that is making you all the money, like that's obviously it's much higher risk, but like why do you need to have exposure to the majors when like they're swinging like maybe 5% on a good day, maybe they pump 15% on an extraordinary day, but like like it just seems like an unnecessary exposure to the market. Like why not just take that 75k, put it into stables, and then just trade aggressively with that 25% and just focus on that, and if the market swings down, like you don't lose anything. Like it's just to be pure risk on doesn't make any sense, because you only need, again, like let me pull it back. If you come into the market with 100 grand and put it into Solana or Bitcoin or Ethereum at this stage, like maybe giving a long enough time horizon, you 2x that money. But if you take 25 grand and just enter the market and buy Sol and just use all of that to ape meme coins, strip back the time horizon stuff, but like if you land the lucky trades in that, you know what you're doing. Like you could easily outperform just holding that 100k in the stables over like fucking 5-year time period. So you just speed run the profit taking. So I just don't understand like why people need the gas tokens if they're not using them to farm yield or something like that. But then stablecoins is strictly better because you can get like 20% APY on just like putting stables on some of those dodgy platforms as well. So like I would rather just treat it as like a total bag of liquidity that is not moving, that if I get a 25% stack wiped, I can pull out another 25% and go back in, rather than just trying to min max an extra 10 to 20% with the 75% of my stack with full risk on retard logic, thinking that the market only goes up until it goes down, then I lose 90% of my net worth. Like, what's the point? Like, the gambling part is making me the money. That's where the focus should be.
I find that's strangely refreshing to hear, because I feel like, it is just that default of like, well, I want a diversified portfolio, so I'm going to have, it depends on risk tolerance as well. Like if you're going to be relatively inactive, you're probably better off just buying Bitcoin and forgetting about it for a while. But it's like if you're going to be here every day and you're going to log into this godforsaken app and look at all these tokens on a daily basis, just get stuck into the trenches. Come on.
Yeah. And I think like, if you're the average person and you're holding Bitcoin, like, and you just like, if it's on an exchange account that you have, or like self-managed super fund, whatever it is called, like, sure, just hold that, sit back, because your time horizon is like long. So it doesn't matter. But if you're an active participant in the market, right, you are able to leverage the capital that you have on high risk short-term assets to outperform holding the majors long-term, right? And then to me, if you can do that, it doesn't make any sense to be holding any risk on in the majors when you are already exposed to ultra risk with the high risk, super high risk assets in terms of memes that you're trading, right? So like, if that doesn't make any sense, then it shouldn't be part of the strategy that you're using to make money. And so therefore, if it's not part of the strategy, you shouldn't be doing it, right? So like, that's how I look at this, right? And so people can call that stupid, but I'm like, no, this is my plan. And that's what I've been executing over, several years, basically, through experience and like lived experience. and that's working for me. Like, if you're telling me you're just holding this, because there's nowhere else to put it, like, I would just argue, like, put it into dollars and then work out a plan for that later that might be more suited to it. Like, there's this idea that you need to be permanently, like, making profits in the market by being always 100% exposed to the markets. But that is just pure retard. Like, at some point, sell, put the profit into the bank, and then form a strategy around investing that money somewhere else. And if you can't think of one, then you didn't have a good answer to the question, and you actually would have lost that money.
Damn. Yeah. Nice. Dude, okay. I have seen a lot of chatter recently in the last few weeks, now that memes have very much cooled off a bit. I've seen so much talk about like a DeFi/utility token renaissance over the next few months. And this idea that like, oh, well, memes have done most of what they're going to do. And we're going to see this like flight to quality, and it's DeFi utility up next. What's your read on that?
I mean, narratives are going to narrative, basically. And look, I think that the issue, I'll expand upon this because this is a bigger issue for crypto, right? The issue for crypto was that, relatively speaking, in terms of time, there was like this promise that crypto was going to do all of this stuff, right? It was going to change the world. Like, it was going to be like some new weird scalable tech stack thing and whatever. Like, just go read the examples of what crypto could do. The narratives, like all these VC narratives that were being pushed for such a long time, and like super tech heavy narratives, and this idea of decentralization and all this stuff. And like,
the future of France meme, essentially, of like, this will revolutionize the entire financial world, yada, yada, yada. Yeah.
But people really believe that about a lot of things. And like, I think most people in crypto held that conviction up until some point at the start of this year, when it started to unravel, because Memecoins started to cook off and people were like, well, actually, none of these other things have done anything. All these airdrops are worth like pennies. These people are building chains for like nobody because there's no users here. It's just the same recycled liquidity over and over again. Actually, maybe there is no meaning to this industry. Maybe it is just a big casino. Okay, if it is, then like, we should just be gambling on these stupid coins that make us laugh. And that kicked off a meta there that, although people thought it would be short term, I think it's a fundamental shift in the way that people view this ecosystem and industry. Very hard to return to a narrative where NFTs make sense, or where DeFi protocols or utility tokens make sense, when the veil has been removed, that those were just like, well-oiled VC grifts that were, TGE exit liquidity events for the investors versus actually solving any tangible problems. So it keeps coming back to this thing about like crypto not really having a core use outside of Bitcoin as a store of value, and maybe stablecoins as an ability to lock profit and, basically keep some stability in the ecosystem, right? Those are the only kind of two fundamental things that really exist as like a consensus opinion, right? All the other stuff, decentralization, etc., like, all these chains doing all this stuff, like, it's been challenged and destroyed because there's no value to those tokens anymore, and like, you can't make money out of that stuff. So yes, we might visit this utility era again and a flight to quality over crap. It's just a narrative kind of shift. But like, fundamentally, people won't be believing in that stuff. So it becomes harder and harder to sell people on the industry as a whole because no one actually believes it anymore, as opposed to before, where some people probably faking belief, but a lot of people did believe. So I don't know how you get that back. I mean, if it was a business, you should be worried. But if it just becomes a huge casino and that becomes the new, defining path, well, then it is what it is. But we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I've seen something from, and this is the part of me, like, this is the jaded part of me now, is that you see Brian Armstrong pushing pretty hard of like, okay, so the first 10 years of crypto have turned out to be like, the best use case was trading. And he wrote that in a tweet and was like, okay, so the primary use case of crypto has been trading. But alongside this base push, he's very much been like, okay, well, now we're going to start to see dApps, stable coins, these kind of things are going to come into the fore, and we'll get the next billion people on chain. And I've always been tripped up by this idea of like, what the fuck are people going to do on chain? Like, what are we actually talking about here? Like, there's this kind of hand wave away of like, trust me, man, we'll get this horrendous number, like what 15% of the world's population on chain, and it's like, to do what?
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll onboard them to what? What are we onboarding them to? Like, because everybody's like, man,
Yep.
when my grandma comes along or when people's grannies are here, that's when I'm leaving the industry, man. I'm going to dump on their heads. It's like, bro, like, what are they going to be doing? Is your fucking grandma going to be trading fucking XD, fascist.eth token on Solana? You know what I mean? It's like, it's so PvP that the people who are even here, like, again, 99% of people made less than $1,000 trading shitters, right? So 99% of people already here cannot do the thing that you're saying your grandma is going to be doing and you're going to be using as exit liquidity. So that's where my like radar is just going off of like, all right, everyone is full of shit. People have no fucking idea. Like, but this is a casino where the odds are weighted in my favor, so I'm going to stick around and play. But there's also a soullessness to that, and I don't think a lot of people talk about that, but like, I fundamentally don't like the idea that it's a giant casino. Like, I would love for there to be applications and stuff being built, like, especially from like a tech nerd perspective, where it actually solved some problems and did some interesting stuff. Like, that is interesting for me to read about, like, at an intellectual level. Just gambling on like retard tokens is not. And like, I have this problem where it's like, it's too profitable for me to leave, but also I hate it here. Like, so
Yep.
it's a challenge. But again, fuck it. I would rather be here than in the spreadsheet factory working some bullshit job. Like
Dude.
that's death for me.
That's like sad music to my ears, but it's a similar vein to where I'm at, particularly when it comes to buying and selling tokens. It's like, I think that this is one of the softest markets in the world, and I would just be an idiot to not be here with the knowledge that I have. It's like, it would be so dumb. But at the same time, I can't say it fills me with existential joy to be like, well, my internet vaporware is going up, and it's not exactly imbuing anything with a sense of meaning.
Yeah.
And so there is that sense of like, fuck, what is this for? And I do think this comes back to that point around like, well, what are people going to do outside of, Bitcoin as a store of value, and like essentially Bitcoin being the original meme coin of fuck banks and its digital gold, which I do think a lot of people will buy. So there's that. And you could say that, sure, that'll go up over time. Then there's stable coins. But the problem is, and this is something I think that would distress a lot of crypto natives, is that a lot of the best use cases for crypto are going to be things that you can't speculate on or own unless you're a private investor in the actual company itself. And I think there's a strange cognitive dissonance there of everyone just believes there'll be some magical use case. What is it? No one knows, but number will just go up simultaneously across the board. And it's like, well, if you actually think about the use cases, and probably one of the better ones for real world utility is stablecoins, unless you are an investor or an owner of a stablecoin startup or Tether or Circle, you're not going to have exposure to it. And I think that's like an uncomfortable truth for a lot of degens to hear of like, listen, 95% of the things you have exposure to are the speculation that was a feature just can't keep going on forever. Yeah. And I don't know where to draw the line of, okay, what do you have exposure to that goes up on a long enough time frame?
Yeah. And again, we don't know, because like, I think the industry is going to be chopping and changing like a lot. And it's just, look, a lot of people got rinsed with FTX and Luna and all the black swan events that we had. So like, that knocked out a lot of the new participants in crypto, and it killed a lot of kind of like the joy. I think if those things hadn't have happened, it would be a very different market that we're in, where utility would still kind of be the norm. To get people who are still in the markets focused back on utility tokens, etc., and like that stuff, I think is going to be a really hard sell. Bringing in new market participants in the current ecosystem is probably non-existent because it's too hard to bring them in. So I think we're set back by a number of years before we kind of revisit kind of like that hopium era of 21, 22, maybe early 23. Maybe another 2 years or something until that sort of can potentially come back. I don't know what the landscape looks like in that time, but like, yeah, fundamentally, like, it's an adjacent kind of like asset class that not many people are like super into. But if you're into that ecosystem, it's kind of a small one, and like you have a competitive edge on investing anywhere else. So like, why not just treat it as that? But in terms of it making sense and all playing out for the long term, I don't know, because I used to work agency side and like working to sell bullshit use cases for crypto to all these companies and stuff, and like tons of them were interested because crypto was like the AI at the time, but like now they don't give a shit. And it's like, I just can't see them revisiting that conversation anytime soon. And if they're not revisiting that conversation anytime soon, then you're just left with crypto native stuff, which is a very diminishing pool. And yeah, then otherwise it's just VCs putting in cash and pumping up tokens and stuff, and you play the everlasting game of the giant ball of liquidity bounces around, and ideally you can pull off a little bit when it comes your way. But yeah, I'm kind of bearish like at the moment. But again, I don't want to make the predictions of the long terms based on the current situation, because that's a fallacy too.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, so we're in this kind of slump at the moment, have been since March, when everyone was like, holy shit, we're going somewhere. And then it's just been half a year of kind of just choppy down. September, the classic 4-year cycle model tells us that September is a bad month and that October, November, December are great. Now, do you hold out any hope for a big old bounce in the next couple of months? Or what's your read on the macro side of things here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hate all that stuff. People have always said it to me like, oh man, like, we're at this point in the cycle. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, we're at this point in the cycle. Like, look at this traditionally over time. This is where we should be and whatever. And like, alts aren't at all-time highs yet. So therefore, we're at this point in the cycle. And I'm like, that's this presupposition that model is somehow correct. And if it is, then again, why don't you put all your money in the market then? It's like, if this chart is absolutely correct and, we can't be somewhere else because this chart says so, then you have information to act on. But that shit is bullshit. Like, it's like these cycles, like, I mean, maybe they did play out originally, like in a similar fashion, but like we had COVID and, stimmy check season and like fucking massive influx of money into the market in 2020, 2021, basically.
And everyone being locked inside with nothing to do, stuck on their computer. What the fuck else were they going to do?
Yeah. And so that really put this price perspective of a lot of people like out of whack. And then when this bull run started, like they're looking at that as, something that's going to be revisited again based on these charts, because, you always have to push a new all-time high. But they weren't even looking at like the root cause of what made the market pump at that stage. Like they look at crypto in a vacuum and look at these charts. Maybe they sometimes look at it and go, well, the Fed is doing this and all this kind of stuff. People have no fucking clue what they're saying. It's like, oh, there's going to be a rate hike. And it's like, they're just laughing as economists. I don't know where the market's going to go. All I know is that it's been trending down for many months. And I was comfortable selling a lot of the majors that I was still holding at pretty decent prices, where people called me a retard. But I'm like, well, this is near some of these all-time highs. That's all that I know. You keep telling me it's going to go higher. I'm cool with it not going higher because this is near the top from last cycle. To me, that seems like a good place to be selling, right? Because that's the only data I have to compare this with. You're talking about data that doesn't exist. You're talking about speculation. And it just happened to kind of like time that exit well. But who knows? Maybe it could have tripped 3x from there, and then I would have been like the biggest retard on the planet. But like, again, people looking at stuff in a vacuum, not looking at the macro sentiment. Like, I have like, this is a little bit of deviation, but I really think that like society is quite fucked. Like, like in the fact that. Like,
please explain. I mean, I'm of a similar mind here. Like, I have a very optimistic hopefulness, but then a very like doomer internal grounding realism where I'm like, oh, okay, not great. But no, please go on.
So like basically, I mean, economically, I would say that like, we could expand this globally, but like, let's just say the global West is not doing well. And there's a whole host of, reasons for this, but like, if young people can't enter the housing market or get a job, that being the biggest profile that is likely to use crypto, to me, that should not be a bull case for some huge onboarding event in terms of users, right? Because they're never going to have enough disposable income. I mean, or you could make the bull case thesis that like they're going to be forced to gamble out of desperation, which could be like an up-only signal. But like, I just think that this narrative around crypto expanding exponentially is really reliant on the economies of the West, or just the economy of the world expanding exponentially, and we're kind of not, like, that has stopped happening. Like, and so I think that like we're entering a period of history where there is going to be a significant amount of economic pain for a lot of people, leading into political shifts. And until we've reached those points, I can't really see like this exponential expansion of crypto markets. Like it doesn't make any sense because the actual market is not doing that. And if that thing, and you know, with the ETFs now, those things are much more closely aligned. It's like, I don't care like what is being said on the news or like what stats people can show. Like I'm talking about, if I go out in the street and I talk to 20 people, none of them know anything about crypto, and you know 19 of them are in economic distress. You know, that's a really good indicator to me that this market is potentially like, you know, too hot already.
Yep. No, I hold out on the idea of like there being some kind of like final speculative zoom upwards. I do hold quite a strong bullish perspective, at least short term, 6 to 9 months. But on the whole, yeah, like it is hard to balance out that empirical knowledge of like every single person, my age at least, that I speak to. I'm yet to run into someone that's in their mid to late 20s that's having a fucking great time. Yeah, economically at least. Like no one I know of is like, oh yeah, cool man, no. Doing well, you know, saving a lot. Everyone's like, oh shit, like I'm only just scraping by on the mortgage. I've only just got enough monies for groceries, and you're like, great.
You can expand that, man. I mean, I'm a bit older than I don't know how old you are, but I'm like, let's say I'm
28.
outside. I'm outside.
28 in 3 days, 2 days actually. Yeah.
Let's just call me mid-30s, and a lot of people in that cohort are. You would be surprised at how poorly they're doing as well. Like they might have been in the job longer, but they don't have any savings because they don't have any financial literacy, and they are just relying on their salary being the only thing that is going to save them. So just because the older boomer millennials got in earlier doesn't mean that they're any better off. Like unless those would like, you know, the people that came from kind of wealthy backgrounds and were able to buy property super early, like the people that bought it like in like the 2010s, like are the ones that are like, or like, you know, 2014 era are the ones that are doing okay. But like you'd have to have been like 21, like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not the average millennial.
No, it's quite interesting because I do hear this thesis of like, oh, well, Zoomers are going to come in, they're jaded as fuck, they're going to discover these internet tokens, and they're just going to hyper gamble their way into wealth. And it's okay. Like I'm somewhat partial. Like this is the thing. It's like I don't like holding things really, really firmly unless I have extremely good reason to hold on to like a thesis. It's like I kind of, I wouldn't say flit is too of a like softer word, but I like holding things loosely and adjusting the strategy based on the information that's there. And a lot of uncertainty hangs with the election. I think that people are overprivileging the on both sides, really. It's like, oh, if Trump gets in, it's hyper speculation forever. I'm like, there's a lot of shit that Trump could do economically that isn't great, like import tariffs. I'm not a professional economist, but it doesn't seem like the greatest idea. And then also this idea of like, well, Harris gets in, it's all fucked, like Bitcoin to 15K. It's like, well, we don't really know that. And also, we've just had like Bitcoin break all-time highs under a hostile administration and a hostile SEC. So why would another 4 years of that just mean instant death?
Yeah, again, like that's looking at things critically and being like, it's probably not going to be much different from where we are now, regardless of the political outcome. And that's probably the assessment that people need to look at is like, okay, do you do a bit of like research on the global economic situation and then maybe look at that as a way to form a thesis on crypto outside of elections and all this bullshit, because like that, I mean, again, like if politicians come in and start fixing things, then you can revisit that opinion. But yeah, I mean, look, you can't be looking at this weird casino speculative asset class and not extrapolate that assessment to the realities of what the everyday person is going in. Because I mean, yes, it is a bubble and it operates outside of what they're doing, but if you're looking at things and trying to add a time horizon to it and not taking that into account, like you're just retardedly just guessing. And yeah, like it makes me incredibly bearish for crypto that's happening. But at the same time, if that shit all goes the way that I think it's going, like who cares about crypto? Like I'll be looking for penicillin to like, you know, treat a tooth infection so I don't die, and you know, maybe drinking rainwater off you know, out of a car boot or something, right? Like,
and that's
like,
why
Yeah,
Let it be
I'll have bigger problems.
boot drinking from the boot, exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think that's why I always hold this just like a kind of broken bullish perspective. Well, I'm like, well, if the ultimate bear case comes true, I'm going to be fighting someone over food from a bin with a pointy stick. So it's really not going to matter. Again, adjust the risk profile based on the information that's there. But I do just hold this idea of like, well, there are enough short-term factors that make me think that there's room left. FTX payments coming back, stablecoin supply growing, the fact that it's just been falling. I do listen, as much as I like reflexively kind of just recoil from like the 4-year model. It's like there are, reasonable justifications around global liquidity and how that kind of plays into when you have a larger credit supply come in. There's much more appetite for risk assets. Now that it's institutionally linked, we could see further inflows. I do think that the institutions getting involved is actually not great for 99% of the market in the long term because things actually become efficient. I don't know if you've met him, but a good friend of mine, Dark Forest, goes by Dark Forest Cat on Twitter. He was like, holy shit, never let the suits try and value our tokens. Because once they figure out that ETH is worth like £3, we're all fucked. And I was like, that's a very fucking dangerous but good point.
Yeah, I like, look, it's going to go where it's going to go. I don't know. I'm not like connected to any of the high end people in this industry. So I'm just going to be like a passive participant riding the wave. But I'm a power user and like, I'll keep doing the thing that is most profitable and playing this casino like the casino that it is. Again, I wouldn't be like, I'm not thinking about, my investment thesis is not like shaped by the fact that like if the world goes to shit, crypto will go to zero. It's also shaped by the fact that like, wow, this market could pull back 50% and maybe not come back for a long time. Therefore, I'm going to adjust risk based on that. But like, I like to have an optimistic view of the world and think that, we will get this shit together and like the economy will start moving in the right direction again. But who knows? And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
I think that as well. It's like I do think that it falls into the naive optimism camp on my behalf, but I tend to think that it's very easy to overprivilege negative outcomes and underprivilege positive outcomes. And it's like even when things are good, we'll also be used to it and find things to complain about. Like things could turn around and we'd still be bitching and moaning about, this shit's happening. And it's like we wouldn't even know how good we had it in the next 3 to 5 years when things got kind of shitty again. And we'd be like, oh, those were actually such good times. So yeah, it's always easy with hindsight bias to make justifications around your current system of thinking. But dude, as a kind of way to wrap up on a happy note or on a utility-based note, what's one of the most important things that you've learned this cycle?
Backup seed phrases well. And have multiple computers or devices for trading. So like if your day-to-day laptop or whatever is what you're doing a lot of the trading on, like again, I'm not talking about phone because I rarely use Telegram bots to trade, but sometimes if like you're using one laptop to access a bunch of stuff, like don't have a lot of the wallets that you're using like accessible through that. Have that on a separate device. Because again, people are holding like 6-7 figure bags on a computer that they're clicking fucking everything on, right? Have that stuff on a separate device that doesn't connect to the internet except to transact a sell and ascend to an exchange or something, right? Again, hardware wallets solve a lot of these issues as well, so that's probably the piece of advice I would give other people. But like, there's some drawbacks to that hardware is not always compatible with everything and can be slower and whatever, and that a physical device can break and you have to get a new one, which is a pain in the ass. But like, yeah, do that. Be safe with your kind of setup and just be in as many group chats as possible looking for consensus opinion among people that you think are decent traders, and then cross-referencing that with kind of like what's going on Twitter. And then trusting your gut, I think, is probably another big one. If you feel that it's right, without having to do any research, if it just ticks all the feeling boxes, maybe just throw a couple of clips in and then go and work out what the fuck it is, because sometimes that works pretty well.
Hell yeah. But thanks so much for coming on the show, dude. Where can people find you on socials? And have you got anything, coming up that you want to shout out to, I think, my total 80 subscribers on YouTube? But this will get some reach on X, the everything app.
They can follow me at lowercase boot on Twitter. And look, I'm not. There's a few things that are cooking, but nothing that I'm going to do anytime soon. But if anybody's in Bali in the next month and want to hang and talk crypto, whatever, I will be there and chilling, and then off to the rest of Asia. So, yeah, that's. I'll offer in-person alpha if they buy me some beers. That's the exchange medium we're going for.
You heard it here first. Beers on boot. Fuck yeah. Dude, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.